you ever tried to read or reread old science fiction books in which they imagined the world after the year 2000? It's quite amusing, because expectations with respect to the technologies of the new millennium were high, but in many cases far from reality. A cliché is that it was thought that in the year 2000, everyone would have been driving some kind of flying car, eliminating the traffic problem forever. Or that our lives would be made much easier by robots. I'm talking about anthropomorphic robots, with human features capable of communicating with us just like a person would. You may be familiar with the cartoon from the 60s, The Jetsons, produced by Hanna-Barbera, the same company that produced The Flintstones. The Jetsons revolves around the adventures of a family, the Jetsons precisely, living more or less in the year 2060. The family consists of the father, mother, a teenage daughter, and a young son. Along with them, however, is also Rosie, a robot maid. Rosie is a robot with human features, wearing maid's clothes and taking care of household chores. In short, the hope was that in the future, some kind of robot would take care of the most boring tasks. Lo and behold, it hasn't quite worked out that way. Sure, we can count on a number of robotic technologies backed by artificial intelligence to make our lives easier. I'm thinking of the Internet of Things. Tools that allow us to have our home always under control, even remotely. Vacuum cleaners that work on their own. But there could be so many examples. In the end, it's true that in the new millennium, not so new any longer, robotics exists and is part of our lives. Perhaps in a somewhat different way than we thought. But no less revolutionary for that. I'm Rosita Martini, and this is Tuned, a podcast that tells the stories, paths, and work done by today's innovators to create the solutions of the future. Tuned is a podcast promoted by Aeroporti di Roma and produced by Cora Media.
I'm born and brought up in India. I did my schooling in a city called Jaipur in another part of the country. And during my school times, I was more inclined towards sports. I was a 100-meter sprinter, at the same time a football player. But the moment when I started my engineering into computer science, my fascination towards robotics grew massively.
Ritukar Vijay is the co-founder and CEO of Ottonomy, a startup involved, as you may have guessed, in robotics. The voice you heard is his. Ritukar has spent a good part of his life dealing with robots. They are a real passion for him. When he was in his freshman year of college, Ritukar got involved in an offbeat hobby, robot competitions. He founded a robotics club together with some friends, and with them, he would engage in these somewhat nerdy competitions.
There were few competitions like, Micro Mouse or Robo Soccer, and where the problem statement was given and multiple teams, used to come up with their solutions, their innovations, so that they can solve the maze or, perform better compared to the opponent's team in Robo Soccer. But one of the most important journey would have been, like, if I have to mention, was RoboCon, which is an international competition organized by Asian Broadcasting Unit Japan. And, we used to participate for these competitions each year. There used to be an international event, which happens. And for that, we have to play nationals. So back in 2005 in India, when we used to participate in RoboCon, there were only 13 teams. And by the time I finished my engineering in 2007, there were almost 50 plus teams which were participating in the nationals event itself. So that was really not just robotics, but actually it had a very strong impact in my life because we used to work days in, day night, whatever time, that was not even a criteria. So, and also creating a team, working with the team, and money was not the fascination at that point at all. It was more about, doing the best and making sure that we win the competition. So learned a lot during those times.
Basically, ever since he was a boy, Ritukar has been passionate about robots. Then he entered the business world, at which point he moved on to a specific technology, that of self-driving cars. This is one of those innovations that exists, is constantly being perfected, but is not yet part of our everyday life. You certainly don't see many self-driving vehicles around, that is. But for Ritukar, it was a crucial inspiration for founding Ottonomy.
Starting from 2015, autonomous cars were becoming a, fascination for not just for, enthusiasts, but large OEM players. Though, when I started working into, autonomous vehicles back in like 2008, 2009, there was a pedigree from US DOD, which was the DARPA Grand Challenge. It was a great thing to have self-driving cars, and almost every research emanated out of that. In 2015 onwards, like commercial applications of autonomous cars started off, and a lot of people actually claimed that they'll have autonomous cars by 2020 or 19, and it just continued. There were billions of dollars which were raised in that phase, but what we saw was that in 2019 there was a huge focus change for all the OEMs to not go for full autonomous driving, but to do electrification of their vehicles first. And we saw that coming a little earlier. So when we started Ottonomy, we decided to use the know-how of autonomous driving to solve a problem of today. And when we looked around, we saw that the labor shortages were hitting literally sky roof.
However, with the pandemic, things changed even more.
Because of the pandemic, there were a lot of new users who also adopted, delivery to their doorsteps or pickups from the retail store. So everything put together, autonomous deliveries made sense. And, that's how we thought that we are going to focus on autonomous deliveries. And that's how Ottonomy was born in midst of pandemic. So, one of the most important things about Ottonomy is to create technology which can solve real problems, right?
If you think about it, robot is a strange word. I wondered where it came from, who first uttered it. And once again, the answer has to do with literature, or better, with science fiction. In fact, the word robot is of Czech origin and comes from the word robota, which means strenuous labor. In the science fiction book R.U.R., written in 1920 by Karel Čapek, the robots that replaced workers were known by this term. They were, in short, those who did the jobs that human beings no longer wanted to do. A definition that seems to me very fitting. As Ritukar said, basically what we ask of technology is for it to solve our problems. But now, it's time to talk about Ottonomy more in depth. I have already mentioned that Ottonomy is a startup that deals with robotics, but more specifically, Ritukar and his team have developed robots that deal with delivery. If you need food or need to receive a package, anything, there's an Ottonomy that can bring it all directly to your location. In addition, Ottonomy is one of the startups selected to participate in Runway to the Future, the acceleration program taking place in Aeroporti di Roma's Innovation Hub. I'd like to better understand what the actual applications are, and that is why I asked Deepak Gupta, the global sales and marketing head of Ottonomy, to explain more about how their idea works.
Ottonomy is a company which is focused primarily on developing self-driving robots. These robots are capable of moving by themselves, just like a smart car, and do not require any human being to guide them or to drive them. That is the principle and the biggest difference in our technology, that our robots are capable of identifying how to navigate on a road or on a street or in an airport, how to avoid obstacles in case somebody is walking towards the robot, to ensure it does not crash into them but navigates around them and continues on its journey.
Okay, so far everything seems clear to me. One of the places where this system can work then is the airport. But how can such a delivery service be useful to passengers?
Today we are used to ordering food from a mobile phone and having the food delivered to us at our home, at a friend's place or in the office. We don't have to get up from a seat and the food is brought right to where we are. However, when it comes to airport, that option is missing. At airports, you will have to get up from your seat at your boarding gate, go all the way to the food court, stand in a line, and then wait for the food to come, eat it, and then go back to your boarding gate. And people don't want to do that. And our robots are able to help them by preventing the need for them to get up, go all the way to the food court, and instead of that, they can just use their mobile phone to order sitting at the boarding gate itself, and the robot will bring the food right up to them at the boarding gate. Another service that we are exploring with Rome Airport is for duty-free shoppers, where people buy a lot of items at duty-free, but then the parcel becomes heavy, and then you don't want to carry that heavy parcel throughout the airport. So we are working with Rome Airport to offer a service where people can shop, and then the robot will bring it to their boarding gates.
I think back to what Ritukar said about the pandemic, to the fact that the world has changed and our habits have changed as well. There is always a lot of rhetoric when we talk about hardship. There is a thing people say quite often, which might be a kind of urban legend, that says that the Chinese ideogram for crisis is composed of the symbols for danger plus opportunity. Well, I think it's always better to keep a positive attitude in life. But it's also true that some crises are simply too hard for some people. I mean, saying that there is always an opportunity seems to me to accuse those who, instead, just can't cope with a crisis. Well, I don't want to be too philosophical. I just want to say that even Ottonomy, which has been able to take advantage of some changes brought about the pandemic, had to face some significant difficulties.
Yeah, starting a tech startup, specifically in midst of pandemic was like one of the most, challenging decisions which we took. And myself and my co-founders and the team, we actually, worked, during when the COVID was at its peak in the US. We were having a pilot at CVG airport, right? So when everybody was at home, we were out there at the airport making sure that the robots are working absolutely fine. So we took a risk. We went out of that comfort zone. We tried to do something to change the panic around the entire environment. So that was one of the toughest things to navigate the COVID restrictions, to navigate the supply chain which got affected because of COVID, but still making these robots, and also managing expectations from the family that, hey, are you safe or not? So why you're doing this? But we were bitten by the passion a lot. So we did what we had to do. And I think if we look back in hindsight, all the decisions were risky, but it was worth taking them.
In each episode of this podcast, we had fun asking the protagonists what recent invention they would like to have invented. Even small things that have changed our lives subtly, but not necessarily in obvious ways. Deepak gave a very specific answer.
For me, WhatsApp is one of the most simple and exciting innovations in the world, because it is a very simple perspective. It's not something new. People always had the phone to call everybody and SMS to text everybody, but WhatsApp eliminated the need for a mobile network, and you could do everything on the Wi-Fi or on the mobile internet without needing to do that. And I think that was a simple and a brilliant invention.
Ritukar also had a very clear idea.
But if I look back, how Uber actually changed the whole world by utilizing the assets which were already there with people, and which were sitting idle in the garages, turned it into a model where every car became a revenue source for individuals. And if you look at, specifically if I talk about US, a lot of people just drive Uber or Lyft because of the simple reason that is the most revenue making thing for them apart from their day job. So people are leaving the day jobs and driving cars because that is one of the most expensive purchases they would have made. So there are two things people buy. One is house and another one is cars. Both are turned into, some way of revenue making. So you call it Uber or you call it Airbnb. I think that is the mindset change which has happened in last, a decade, I'll say. And if I would have been in a position to do that like way back, I would have loved it.
I began this episode by talking about science fiction, about how in the past humanity imagined the future. There are a wealth of examples to choose from on this topic, from Asimov to Kubrick, not to mention Philip K. Dick or Ray Bradbury. Hundreds of writers and filmmakers have imagined the future in the most diverse ways. Not always reassuringly, to tell you the truth. Regardless of whether their prophecies have come true or not, in any case, these works of science fiction all have one thing in common. They help you dream. They jumpstart your imagination. They are an incredible source of inspiration. This applies to all great works, of course, not just those about the future. And Ritukar said a couple of things about this.
So, Star Wars was one of the most important movies. Then we have Terminators and, iRobot. So Hollywood movies always, inspires you to, have a sneak peek into the future. And just like any ordinary kid, I was fascinated by, those Hollywood movies and, just always thought that if that is possible. And I can see the same thing in my kid as well, who is fascinated by Avengers. And I don't know if they can, people can fly in next 10 to 15 years from now, just like what Iron Man can do. So I think it's a source of inspiration and it opens up your imagination. And it definitely helps, learn something or be passionate about something, which interests you.
Spreading ideas to inspire new ideas. I am a great believer in this philosophy. In the 6th episode of this podcast, basically, that's what we wanted to do. Give a voice to those who imagine new things and manage to make them concrete, tangible, hoping that these stories can also inspire the innovators of tomorrow. Robots were born when someone fantasized about a machine that could do certain jobs and relieve humanity from doing them. Then comes the creator, the builder. But the initial seed, after all, starts to develop from there, from our ability to imagine a better world. Tuned is a podcast series written by Ilaria Orru, promoted by Aeroporti di Roma and produced by Cora Media. Studio recordings by Andrea Girelli. Post-production and sound design by Davide De Benedetti for Filmico. Sound and music supervision by Andrea Girelli. Production, Monia Donati. Text editing by Graziano Nani. Additional music is under license by Machiavelli Music and Universal Music Publishing Ricordi SRL.